The rain hadn't stopped for days. It pelted the stone walls of Riverrun like drums of war, whispering warnings no one listened to. The South still thought the North was broken, that the Starks were scattered, bleeding, dead or captured. But they didn't know the truth. Ned Stark was alive. He should have died. Joffrey wanted his head on a spike, and for a while, everyone believed he got it. Even his own children thought so. But in the darkest cells of the Red Keep, where the rats screamed louder than the prisoners, Varys made a choice. "The realm needs balance," Varys whispered, unlocking Ned's cell one cold night. "A Stark in the shadows is more valuable than a Stark dead." They staged the execution with a body double, a northern man who owed the spider more than his life. It was dirty, twisted work, but so was politics. And Varys knew deep down that something worse was coming. Something red, something that would stain Westeros forever unless someone strong enough stopped it. And so, Ned was smuggled out. Not back to Winterfell. Not yet. He was taken to the Vale under the secret protection of Howland Reed, his oldest and most loyal friend, and the few remaining bannermen who still whispered his name like a prayer. Time passed, and the War of the E. 5 Kings raged. Ned watched from the shadows. His son Robb crowned king in the north. His bannermen rallied behind him. Catelyn fought beside him. But betrayal was in the wind. Tywin Lannister was always 10 moves ahead, and Walder Frey, old, bitter, and greedy, was sharpening his knives behind wedding veils. Ned found out just in time. He heard it from a dying raven, intercepted by one of Reed's scouts. The message was clear. King Robb to attend Edmure's wedding at the Twins. Final terms agreed. The North bends the knee. It didn't make sense. Robb would never kneel. And Walder Frey, he was no friend to wolves. That's when Ned knew. The South hadn't just underestimated the North. They thought they'd erased it. Ned didn't have much. No armies, no banners, no castle walls. But he had men who would die for him, and a cause that burned hotter than any wildfire. Justice. He sent word to the Blackfish at Riverrun and to Lady Maege Mormont in Bear Island. Quiet messages smuggled through river paths and whispered through brothels and inns. His words were simple. The Red Wedding is a trap. Trust no Frey, protect the king. But the Freys were faster. Or maybe the North was too tired to believe. In hope, until Ned Stark walked into the Twins himself. He wore no sigils. His hair was longer, grey streaked and wild. His beard had grown and his back carried the weight of ghosts. But when he entered that cursed hall the night before the wedding and locked eyes with Catelyn, she dropped her goblet in shock. Her voice cracked. "Ned?" The music stopped. You could hear a pin drop. Walder Frey blinked once, then twice. This some jest? But it wasn't. Not when Rose Bolton's hand slid to his dagger. Not when Frey guards began shifting near the doors. They were going to do it tonight, not even wait for the bedding. And Ned, 7 hells, Ned Stark didn't hesitate. He pulled a dagger from beneath his cloak and threw it straight into the throat of the closest Frey. "To me!" he roared, like a ghost of winter coming back for blood. Then the North remembered. Swords clashed, wolves howled, and the wedding feast turned into something else entirely. Not a massacre, not a betrayal, a reckoning. Steel rang against steel, and the screams that echoed in the halls of the Twins weren't from joy or drunken laughter anymore. They were the screams of men dying, of vengeance uncoiling like a serpent, finally let loose. Robb stood frozen for a moment, watching chaos erupt around him. His mind couldn't catch up. One moment he was raising his cup to toast Edmure's reluctant marriage. The next, he saw his father, a man he had mourned, believed long dead, throwing a dagger with the precision of a wolf cutting down prey. Then it hit him. It was real. "Protect the king!" Ned's voice thundered again, and this time Robb didn't hesitate. Grey wind was already loose, tearing through Frey soldiers like they were strawmen. Cat was screaming something, and rose. Bolton had vanished into the crowd like a damn snake. Blood sprayed across the tablecloths, knocking goblets, roasted meats, and golden platters to the floor. Robb grabbed his sword and yelled for his bannerman. Great John Umber, never far from a fight, was already swinging his axe like a man possessed. You Frey bastards think you can butcher wolves? The Great John howled, cleaving a soldier's head nearly in half, and then Blackfish appeared at the doorway, sword drawn, eyes burning. Ned had warned him. The Raven reached River Run just hours before the feast. Brynden Tully hadn't questioned it for a second. He rode hard, brought 50 men, and when he saw the truth unfolding in that cursed hall, he didn't ask for orders. He joined the storm. Seize Walder Frey, the Blackfish bellowed, alive if possible, but Walder was gone. Slippery old man. Guards dragged him away through a side passage, protected by sons and grandsons too cowardly to face the truth. Catelyn Stark had taken cover behind an overturned table, blood dripping from a gash above her brow. Her hands shook, but she saw Ned, her Ned, slashing down a man twice his size like he was swinging the justice of the gods. They locked eyes again through the madness. Tears blurred her vision. He had come back. For Robb, for her, for them all. And something inside her, something that had been shattered the day she thought her husband died, something brittle and quiet, began to burn again. She picked up a blade from the floor and stabbed a Frey soldier, trying to charge her son. The Stark women weren't built to sit and scream anymore. Meanwhile, outside the hall, the Northern army waited. Mage Mormont, flanked by her daughters, had received Ned's call and ridden south with speed only fury could grant. They'd seen the writing on the wall. How Robb's victories were suddenly turning cold. How bannermen were starting to whisper about the king's choices. But now, with Frey treachery revealed and Eddard Stark alive, the fire reignited. They surged toward the castle like a black tide. The twins were never built to withstand a siege from both inside and out. By morning, half the Freys lay dead, another quarter had surrendered, and the rest had fled into the rivers like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Robb stood among the blood-soaked stones, armor-dented, hair soaked in sweat, blood, some his, most not. He looked at his father, whose eyes were tired but sharper than ever. "I thought you were dead," Robb said hoarsely. "I was," Ned replied, "but the realm has no use for dead men, only living ones who remember what honor used to mean." Robb said nothing. He didn't know how to say everything he felt, so he just stepped forward and embraced his father in the middle of the ruined hall. Northern soldiers stood around them, kneeling one by one, not just to a king now, but to the return of a Stark they feared they'd never see again. But this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning, because now the Lannisters knew Ned Stark lived, and Tywin never let loose ends breathe for long. The Raven reached King's Landing at dusk. It flew in low, its feathers soaked, wings battered by storms from the riverlands, but it made it. And it carried with it words that froze the blood in Tywin Lannister's veins. The North has risen, the Red Wedding has failed. Eddard Stark lives. Walder Frey is captured. The king in the north marches south with fire in his eyes. Tywin dropped the letter without a word. Even Cersei, who had been pacing the chamber, her wine goblet already half empty, felt the cold silence settle in like a fog. "That's impossible," she muttered. "He's dead. We saw it. The head. On. A spike. Joffrey made a show of it." But Tyrion had already picked up the Raven's scroll and was reading it again. Twice, then a third time. "It's no fake," he said quietly. "This is real. They were planning a massacre, and the Stark wolf beat them to it." Cersei turned to Tywin. "What does it mean?" Tywin didn't answer her. He simply stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city like it might suddenly crumble before his eyes. His plan had failed. Everything he built, the Red Wedding, the crushing of the Northern spirit, the complete Lannister dominance, was now burning at the hands of a man he had underestimated. "The North will not forget," Tywin finally said. "And now they will not forgive either." Cersei clenched her fists. Then we crush them. We still have the throne. We still have the crown. Let them come. Tyrion snorted. You don't understand. It's not just Robb anymore. It's Eddard Stark, and people love that man. Even the South will hesitate before fighting him. He has history on his side. Tywin turned, his voice low and dangerous. Then we remind the world what happens when you defy the lion. Back in the Riverlands, the Frey stronghold had become a prison. Robb refused to burn it down, though some begged him to. Let the rats hide in their ruin, he said. Let this place stand as a monument to treachery. Walder Frey, captured and shackled in his own hall, spat blood at Ned's feet. You should have died, Stark. The South doesn't need your damn honor anymore. Ned didn't flinch. And you'll die never knowing what real honor tasted. Like. Catelyn stood behind him, eyes fixed on the man who had plotted the murder of her son. Her hand shook as it gripped her dagger. Let me slit his throat, she whispered to Ned. He doesn't deserve a trial. He doesn't deserve heir. But Ned shook his head. No. He'll rot. He'll live to see what the North becomes without him. And so Walder Frey was locked away, not as a martyr, but as a coward who had failed at the only thing he was ever asked to do: be loyal. As days passed, the northern banners gathered. House Mormont, House Glover, House Reed. Even the stragglers of House Karstark returned, some in shame, others in renewed loyalty. Because the North had not just a king now, it had its patriarch back. Robb deferred to his father, not as a king, to a lord, but as a son to the only man who ever taught him what ruling truly meant. Your crown is yours, Ned told him one night by the fire. I wear it for us all, Robb replied. But I can't wear it without you guiding me. Ned said nothing, only nodded once, because war had returned, and the North needed more than crowns and titles. It needed unity. It needed vengeance. And now the South had reason to tremble again. But across the sea in Essos, a silver-haired queen heard whispers too. Stark lives, Jorah Mormont told her one morning, handing her a parchment. And he stopped the Red Wedding. Daenerys read the note carefully, then looked up at the wide sky above Meereen. The Game of Thrones begins again, she said. The North moved like a storm reborn. From the ruins of the Frey's betrayal, Robb and Ned gathered their armies, not just in number, but in resolve. Every bannerman who had bent the knee, every sworn sword who once doubted, now marched with a fire in their hearts that hadn't burned since Winterfell stood whole and proud, and they weren't alone. House Tully had risen. With Blackfish leading their vassals and Edmure freed, River Run became a rallying point for the River Lords who had lost family to Frey treachery. They didn't mourn anymore. They armed themselves. At Moat Cailin, the remnants of the Ironborn. Occupation had been driven out. Howland Reed sent ravens to every corner of the neck, and even the Crannogmen, silent, secretive, almost myth, stepped out from the bogs to follow the wolf that never died. But perhaps most shocking, most unexpected of all, the Vale had moved. Ned Stark's resurrection from the dead, or so many believed, sent shockwaves across Westeros, but it was his sister's silence that opened new doors. Lysa Arryn, always reclusive and paranoid, had long refused to engage in the war, hiding behind her gates with her son. But when she heard her dead brother lived, and that his son nearly died at a wedding designed by the Lannisters, her cold indifference cracked. She didn't open the Vale because she cared about Robb. She opened it because Ned Stark was alive, and she owed him everything. And so the Knights of the Vale began moving under cover of fog and stone, ready to descend on the south like snow falling off a cliff. In the quiet of the campaign tent near Seaguard, Robb sat across from his father, maps spread between them. The air smelled of damp parchment, sweat, and steel. We can't march directly. To King's Landing, Ned said. Tywin will have dug in by now. He's not a man to wait for the blow, he throws it. Robb nodded. We take Harrenhal first, then push toward the Blackwater, cut them off from the reach. If Mace Tyrell sees the wind shift, he might stay in his gardens." Ned stared at the map, then looked up slowly. "You trust the Tyrells. I trust they don't want to back a sinking lion." A ghost of a smirk touched Ned's lips. "That's something." Then Robb grew quiet. The candlelight flickered as his eyes settled on the southern roads. "And what of Arya?" he asked. "And Bran, Rickon, Sansa?" Ned's face darkened. "I don't know where your sisters are. I don't know what became of your brothers. But I promise you, we'll find them, all of them." Robb clenched his jaw. "If Joffrey has hurt them, he will answer for it." Ned said, "So will his mother and his grandfather." Back in King's Landing, Joffrey's madness bloomed. He was barely sleeping now, hearing voices through the walls, convinced wolves were coming to rip out his throat. Cersei tried to calm him, but the boy king had never been good at listening, especially when fear was stronger than pride. "They're marching for me," he snarled. "That bastard Robb and his old man, they want my crown." "You still have the throne," Cersei snapped. "You still have the gold cloaks. You are king." Joffrey laughed. "I want their heads, mother. Bring me Ned Stark's head again. I'll shove it in a cage this time and make the birds feed on it alive." But Tywin didn't laugh. He sat in the council chambers with Varys, Pycelle, and Baelish, silent and cold. "We underestimated him," Baelish said, swirling wine in his goblet. "I admit I thought he'd be bones by now, but bones don't raise armies." Varys offered a polite nod. "And men don't follow ghosts unless those ghosts make them feel like men again." Tywin leaned forward, his voice like stone, grinding. "Steel. We crush them, all of them. No mercy, no prisoners, no north left to remember." But far away across the narrow sea, another fire stirred. Daenerys Targaryen stood atop the Great Pyramid in Meereen, watching her dragons circle in the dying sun. Her advisors whispered of war in Westeros, of Ned Stark's survival, of Lannisters being hunted, and for the first time Daenerys smiled. "Let them tear each other apart," she said softly. "When they're done bleeding, I'll take what's left." And in the north, at the walls, Frozen Edge, Jon Snow stood atop Castle Black, watching the snow fall like it always had. Relentless, he didn't know his father lived. But soon, the North would call, and this time, even the Night's Watch wouldn't be able to hold back what was coming. The storm finally broke. After weeks of maneuvering, the North came down upon Harrenhal, the once great fortress now blackened and broken, held by a mix of Lannister men and those who wore their colors out of fear, not loyalty. It was never going to be a fair fight. Robb's host came from the west, while the Vale's knights, armored like silver phantoms, descended from the east. Ned Stark had cut off the southern routes days before with a group of river lords. They didn't plan to siege Harrenhal, they planned to suffocate it. The battle lasted only a day, maybe less. Inside, the Lannister men tried to hold, but they weren't fighting for a cause, only for coin. And coin didn't stop blades or arrows. For two, Robb rode through the shattered gates flanked by Great Janumber and Mage Mormont. The banners of the Lion were already being burned. By dusk, Harrenhal flew the direwolf and the trout side by side. But Robb wasn't celebrating. Not really. He found the dungeons full of corpses, some barely bones. Others had only just died, starved, tortured, forgotten, and in one cell a girl with tangled hair and blue eyes blinked up at him through the bars. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. He stared. She had the Tully eyes, the stark cheekbones. Dirt smeared her face, but beneath it there was something heartbreakingly familiar. "My name is Robb Stark," he said. The girl blinked again, her lip trembling. "My name is Arya." Ned collapsed to his knees when he saw her. He hadn't cried, once since his escape from King's Landing, not when he learned of Theon's betrayal, not even when he learned Winterfell was sacked and Bran and Rickon presumed dead. But when he held his little girl, his wolf-blooded daughter, who had vanished into the world like a shadow, his heart cracked. "You came back," he whispered. Arya was too stunned to speak at first. She just nodded, clutching him like she had when she was a child afraid of storms. Catelyn sat with them, tears streaming silently down her face. They were getting pieces of their family back, but it only reminded them how many were still missing. Word spread like wildfire across the kingdoms. Robb Stark holds Harrenhal. Ned Stark leads the armies of the north. Arya Stark lives, and from the ashes of the Frey betrayal, a new name began to spread too. The Winter Court. Not just a kingdom, but a reckoning. Back in King's Landing, Tywin's patience snapped. He ordered Sir Gregor Clegane to march with 3,000 men and burn every village that so much as whispered the name Stark. Entire hamlets were wiped out. Innocents hung from trees with placards that read, "Traitor." This wasn't a war anymore, it was a purge, but every atrocity made the North's fury stronger. And at Dragonstone, another quiet storm gathered. Stannis Baratheon, already burning. With prophecy and vengeance, now listened closely to the flames. "They gather in the Riverlands," Melisandre said, her red eyes gleaming. "A king reborn, a wolf returned, and fire calls to them." "I am the rightful king," Stannis muttered. "Then take what is yours," the Red Woman hissed, "before the wolves become gods." In the night, Robb stood atop the walls of Harrenhal with Ned and Arya beside him. Smoke from burning lion banners still drifted behind them. "What happens now?" Arya asked, her voice small. Robb didn't answer, because in the distance scouts had brought word. Tywin was marching, with fire, with fury, with everything he had. "He's coming for us," Ned said quietly. Robb nodded. "Then let him come." And, far to the north at Castle Black, the snow blew harder. Jon Snow stood by the wall, looking south now. Not toward the wildlings, not toward the icy threat of the White Walkers, but toward home. Something stirred in his chest. The wolves were howling. Again, and he would not be left behind. Left behind. The sky over the Riverlands turned black. Not from clouds, not from storms, but from the smoke of 1,000 burning homes. Tywin Lannister marched like a plague, controlled, merciless, and precise. Villages that dared harbor northern men were wiped from the map. Entire bloodlines ended in a single sunrise. To him, this was not vengeance. It was mathematics. The Starks had become symbols, and symbols had to be broken before they could inspire revolt. But what Tywin didn't count on was that the North had already bled too much to fear anything anymore. The more fire he brought, the colder the North became. Ned Stark stood atop the walls of Harrenhal, face lined with exhaustion, eyes steady on the horizon. He wasn't a man chasing glory. He didn't want the Iron Throne. He didn't want songs sung about him. He wanted his family safe, his people left alone, and justice for the crimes committed in the name of a false crown. Below, Robb trained with Arya, their swords clashing in the muddy yard. She was faster now, sharper. The girl who had once danced with wooden swords was gone. In her place was someone else, a blade molded by survival and silence. "She'll make a better knight than most grown men," Robb muttered, rubbing his sore wrist after she disarmed him. "She was born with a sword in her soul," Ned replied. "She just had to suffer enough to let it grow." Catelyn, watching from the steps, said nothing. Her heart broke every time she looked at Arya now, not because she was lost, but because she had survived things no child should ever endure. But the time for healing was over. Tywin had finally shown his hand, and his target wasn't Robb anymore. It was Ned. "He knows you're the symbol," Robb said late that night as they studied the map. "He thinks killing you ends us again." Ned nodded slowly. "Then we don't let him choose the battlefield." They agreed. "Meet him before he..." crosses the Trident. Use the river itself as the blade. Robb would lead the charge with the bulk of the army, while Ned circled around with the Vale's knights for a crushing flank. The plan was bold, risky, but it was stark. The two armies met at Darry's Field, just west of the Trident. It was a cursed place already, burned by the war, soaked in mud and bones. Now it would become a graveyard of lions. Tywin brought 20,000 golden banners gleaming, siege towers rolling behind him, and trebuchets lined with fire barrels. Robb brought fewer men, but fiercer ones, Northmen, river lords, knights of the Vale. And they had something Tywin didn't, a reason to kill. The night before the battle, Ned walked among the tents. He didn't give speeches. He didn't wear his old lord's armor or ride a great black horse. He simply met eyes with the men who would die for him. He said their names, he thanked them, and when he returned to his tent, Arya was there, sharpening her blade. "I want to fight," she said quietly. "You will," Ned answered. "But not today." "Why not?" "Because you're a Stark, and Starks don't throw themselves at wolves who've already shown their teeth. We choose when to bite back." She stared at him, jaw clenched. "I don't want revenge anymore. I want them to feel what I felt." Ned looked at her for a long time. "They will." At dawn, the sky bled red. Robb's men clashed with the front lines like thunder rolling over the hills. Lannister archers loosed volleys, cutting down dozens in minutes, but the northern shield wall held. And just as Tywin committed his reserves, Ned Stark appeared on the eastern ridge, with 5,000 knights of the Vale, banners flapping in the rising wind. He charged down like snow collapsing from a mountain. Tywin turned, eyes wide. The lion had finally been outmaneuvered. Hours later, the battlefield was a slaughterhouse. Thousands dead. The Trident ran pink, and in the center, Tywin Lannister knelt, his sword broken, his armor cracked. Ned Stark stood over him. "You've killed my men, burned my home, betrayed my family, and you had the gall to say it was for the realm." Tywin spat blood. "You think killing me brings peace? It brings chaos. You don't know the game. You never did." Ned stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time someone ended the game." And with one clean stroke, he did. Tywin Lannister died at Ned Stark's feet, not in a bed, not with a goblet in hand, but as a defeated man, brought down by the one ghost he failed to bury. News spread faster than ravens could fly. Tywin is dead. The Starks hold the Riverlands. The lions have fallen. And in King's Landing, Joffrey screamed until his throat bled. Because for the first time, the boy king understood something. Winter wasn't coming. Winter was already here. King's Landing had never felt this quiet. The streets weren't full of shouting or song. The Goldcloaks patrolled twice as often now, but their eyes darted to shadows like hunted animals. Markets opened late, closed early. Rumors moved faster than food. One whisper became truth by sundown. Tywin is dead. Ned Stark killed him. Inside the Red Keep, Joffrey's madness deepened. The boy king stormed through halls like a caged wolfpup, his crown askew, his voice cracking as he screamed orders no one wanted to follow. "I want his head," he shrieked, flinging goblets from the high table. "I want all the Starks dead. Burn their cities, salt their fields. Bring me their children and I'll feed them to the dogs." Cersei tried to calm him, tried to put on the queenly mask that had worked for so long. But now the walls were closing in, and even the Lannister gold was no longer enough to buy loyalty. Tyrion sat in the corner of the council chamber, wine untouched. He didn't speak much these days. Not since he'd read the report of Tywin's death a dozen times and still couldn't believe it. He was always 5 moves ahead, he muttered to Varys. Always. And perhaps, Varys replied, that was his mistake. He thought 5 moves ahead, but Ned Stark only needed 1. The right one. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Ned rode slowly through a quiet village near Harrenhal. The banners flew high, the direwolf, the trout, and the crescent moon of House Arryn. The war had turned, but his heart hadn't rested. He'd killed Tywin, yes. He'd stopped the Red Wedding. He'd reclaimed Arya. But Bran and Rickon were still missing, and Sansa was still a pawn in the capital if she was even alive. A raven had come 3 days earlier with troubling words. Sansa Stark wed to Tyrion Lannister, against her will. Robb had raged. Catelyn had wept. Ned had said nothing. That night, he stood by a campfire watching flames crackle as Arya sat beside him, cleaning her sword in silence. "She's not safe," Arya said, not looking up. "Sansa, we have to get her out." Ned stared into the fire. "We will. How? King's Landing isn't just going to open the gates." He finally looked at her. "Then we burn the gates down." In the camp nearby, Robb held council with the Northern Lords, the Blackfish, and Lady Maege Mormont. The North wanted blood, not just revenge, justice, closure, finality. "We march south," Robb said. "We take King's Landing." Some balked. "What of Stannis? What of Daenerys? The dragons?" "They can wait," Robb growled. "The boy king who tried to butcher our family still sits on that throne. As long as Joffrey breathes, we are not safe." And none argued further. The army began to move, slowly, carefully, but with intent. In the capital, Varys grew nervous. He met Tyrion beneath the Red Keep, among the forgotten passages and echoing halls of stone and shadow. "We are losing control," the spider whispered. "And if Joffrey does something reckless..." Tyrion exhaled. "He already has. He's planning to put Sansa on public trial, blame her for everything. Her father's return, the war, his grandfather's death. He wants to execute her?" Varys asked. "He wants to make it a show." Varys didn't move for a moment. Then he said, very softly, "Then we have no choice. We help her escape." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "You'd risk your own neck for a girl?" Varys met his gaze. "I'm not saving a girl. I'm saving the realm from what this boy has become." And so, beneath moonlight, Sansa Stark vanished. Guided through old tunnels, cloaked and silent, she passed the Dragon Pit ruins and boarded a small ship waiting in Blackwater Bay. By dawn, Joffrey was screaming, purple-faced, tearing apart his chambers. "She's gone? How? You let her escape!" He beat Sir Meryn until the night bled through his helm. Cersei watched in quiet horror. Her son wasn't a king anymore. He was a ticking bomb. As the sun rose days later, so did the banners of the North. Just beyond, the King's Road, stretching far enough that ravens couldn't carry the fear fast enough. Ned Stark rode at the front this time, no longer hiding in shadow. His armor bore no gold, no jewels, only the grey direwolf and a man's cold silence. Beside him, Robb rode with rage in his veins, and Arya, though kept from the front line, watched everything, memorizing the path to vengeance. And then came the first signal fire. The North had arrived, and for the first time since the Targaryens burned Harrenhal, the capital began to pray for mercy. But winter does not offer mercy. The wind over King's Landing carried a cold it hadn't felt in generations. Even under the blazing sun, a chill crept through the alleys, up the stones of the Red Keep, and into the marrow of every soul inside. The North had come, and unlike any war before, it didn't come with songs or banners waving proudly. It came with silence, a creeping, patient silence. Ned Stark camped just beyond the Blackwater Rush, where his scouts reported Joffrey's madness. Growing bolder by the hour, the boy king now executed his own advisors, had the city crier flayed for reading a poem with too much wolf sympathy, and even threatened to burn the Sept of Baelor to purge the gods that failed him. But no one would stop him, because the only man who could, Tywin, was gone, and everyone else was too afraid, too broken, or too tired, except one. In the darkness beneath the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister visited the cell where Grand Maester Pycelle once kept poisons hidden in scrolls. He pulled a small vial from a crack in the wall. Then he lit a single candle. "I'm sorry, Father," he whispered, "but you created a monster, and now I have to smother him." That same night, Robb Stark stood at the edge of the Blackwater, his boots caked in dried mud, his sword newly sharpened. Behind him, 20,000 Northmen and Riverlords stood ready. The Knights of the Vale controlled the eastern flank, and Blackfish had sealed off the southern escape routes. Ned rode up beside his son, his breath calm, measured. "This won't be a siege," Robb said. Ned nodded. "This is an ending." Before the first horn sounded, a raven flew overhead, dropping a sealed letter into the dirt at the foot of Ned's horse. The seal had the shape of a lion, but was split in half. Ned read the message silently. Then he whispered, "He's dead." "Who?" Robb asked. Ned passed him the letter. "Joffrey Baratheon, dead by poison, a gift from his uncle. Signed, Tyrion of House Lannister." Inside the city, chaos broke before the bells. Joffrey's death triggered riots. Lannister loyalists fought, each other in the streets. The Goldcloaks tried to hold the gates, but were either bought off or too scared to lift their spears. Common folk broke open food stores, freed prisoners, and hung Lannister banners upside down. When the gates finally opened, not forced but abandoned, the North walked through not as conquerors, but as executioners of justice long delayed. There was no glory, only blood, ashes, and reckoning. Ned entered the Red Keep first. The Iron Throne stood there empty. Its blades reflected no light, only the ghosts of those it had consumed. He didn't approach it. He looked at it once, with the contempt of a man who'd seen too many die for a chair, and turned away. Robb followed. Behind him, Arya. "This is yours," Robb said. Ned shook his head. "No, let the game end with them." "But the realm needs someone," Arya whispered. "The realm needs peace, not more kings." By sundown, the lords gathered in the throne room. Tyrion escorted in, chains but defiant. Cersei under guard, hollow-eyed, her son gone, her father gone, and the legacy of House Lannister reduced to dust. Ned addressed the court plainly. "No more blood," he said. "No more lies. You wanted a king. You got a boy king. You wanted peace. You started wars. Now the wolves have come, not to rule, but to bury the dead. Some begged him to take the crown. Others offered Robb the throne. Both men refused. Instead, they put forth a council of lords, a chosen body to represent each region, bound by honor and law, not ambition and inheritance. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be better. As spring approached, the North returned home, battered but alive. Arya chose to ride east, toward Braavos, to chase what still burned inside her. She hugged her father tighter than ever before and whispered, "If I'd seen your head on that spike, I'd have burned the whole city myself." Ned smiled. "That's why I had to live, to keep that fire pointed in the right direction." Back at Winterfell, new walls were raised, new oaths sworn. Bran and Rickon, later discovered alive in the wilds thanks to Howland Reed's trackers, were brought home. Sansa, safe across the narrow sea, would return in time, and for the first time in what felt like a century, House Stark was whole again. The Red Wedding never happened, but vengeance still came. Just not as a knife in the dark. It came as the North, remembering. It came as a father's return. It came as wolves refusing to die quietly. And when history spoke of those days, it didn't speak of thrones or dragons or gold. It spoke of one truth. They planned the Red Wedding. Ned Stark planned their end.